In the world of professional sports, few players have displayed the kind of leadership both on and off the field that Shedeur Sanders has shown. Yet, in an unexpected turn of events, it seems the Cleveland Browns coaching staff, including Kevin Stefanski, has been actively working to suppress Sanders' role within the team, despite his clear readiness to lead.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Sanders has been subjected to a series of questionable decisions that leave fans wondering, why isn't he starting? The video suggests that these moves are not random, but part of a larger strategy designed to maintain control over the team's hierarchy. This calculated effort to sideline Sanders, despite his abilities, is rooted in fears of disruption. Stefanski and other figures within the organization seem intent on keeping Sanders from outshining established quarterbacks, fearing that his natural charisma and leadership could challenge the status quo. This manipulation, as outlined in the video, reveals the dark side of professional sports organizations, where talent is sometimes squashed not for lack of ability, but to safeguard control and power. In the end, the truth about Sanders' potential and the deliberate moves to suppress it will inevitably come to light, forcing a reckoning within the Browns organization. It's not just a quarterback controversy, it's an organizational crisis. What started as whispers around practice rotations and questionable injury reports has now exploded into a full-on scandal, with the Cleveland Browns at the center and head coach Kevin Stefanski scrambling to contain the fallout. Shedeur Sanders, a player with clear upside, real leadership, and a growing grassroots following, is being held back, and not by performance or readiness, but by design. The leaks say it all. There's alleged manipulation happening behind the scenes, and it's not subtle. Strategic decisions that seem routine on the surface, depth chart movements, play calling, limited reps, are now being interpreted in a much darker light. They're not just decisions. They're deterrents, moves made to protect egos, preserve hierarchy, and suppress what Sanders represents, a player who can't be controlled, branded, or sidelined without resistance. From the outside, it might look like another slow development path, but from the inside, it looks like sabotage. Sanders has every quality you'd want in a leader, not just athleticism, not just pocket presence, but composure, poise, and a sense of responsibility that goes beyond the game. His community outreach isn't performative. It's consistent. His leadership isn't loud. It's respected. That scares people who operate from control, not confidence. And that's exactly what seems to be happening inside the Browns organization. Because when leadership becomes more invested in optics than outcomes, this is the result. You get an internal culture where control is currency and independence is a threat. That's the culture Sanders is walking into. And that's the culture that's working overtime to keep him buried. This isn't about giving Dylan Gabriel a chance. This is about blocking Shedeur Sanders from getting one. Gabriel's rise to starter status didn't come after a dramatic breakout. It came after organizational preference. His appointment to QB1 feels less like a reward and more like a shield, a way to maintain the illusion of order while keeping Sanders locked out of the spotlight. Because the second Sanders gets real minutes, the conversation changes, the hierarchy shakes, and suddenly, it's not about Stefanski's strategy anymore. It's about why it took so long. And that's what they're really trying to avoid. Everything, from the rotation patterns to the back injury that conveniently flares up whenever media pressure mounts, feels curated, too curated. Because the worst-case scenario for Stefanski and the current regime isn't that Sanders fails. It's that he succeeds, that he steps onto the field, outperforms expectations, and makes it obvious that he should have been playing all along. At that point, the conversation shifts from game planning to accountability. And based on the leaks, that's a conversation this organization isn't prepared to have. The Browns have been quietly trying to control the narrative. But the more they push this version of the story, the more people are asking, what are they so afraid of? Sanders hasn't caused issues. He hasn't been problematic. He's been a model of discipline, maturity, and team-first mentality. So why the hesitation? Why the stalling? Why are they going out of their way to delay a player who, by every public account, is ready to lead? Because this isn't about performance. It's about power. The leaks didn't just expose a manipulation strategy. They revealed the deeper fear behind it. Sanders' presence challenges everything the current leadership is built on. He doesn't wait to be told how to lead. He doesn't rely on press conferences or team branding to create his image. He builds it through action, through engagement, through community. And that's a style of leadership that doesn't need permission to exist. That's the real threat. Sanders is rising without them, and they don't know how to stop it. The organization prefers control, controlled narratives, controlled roles, controlled perception. Sanders breaks that mold. He speaks through action, not press releases. He doesn't have to sell fans on who he is. They already believe in him. And the deeper that connection gets, the harder it becomes to justify why he's not on the field, which is why they've leaned so heavily on vague injuries and strategic silence. The longer they can delay his debut, the longer they can delay the questions. But those questions are coming, and they're getting harder to dodge. Because the more you look at how Sanders is being handled, the more it starts to reflect a broader issue within the Browns. A top-down fear of change. A fear that someone with real influence might shift the balance. That someone who connects with fans in a real way might disrupt the hierarchy that's been quietly maintained behind the scenes. And let's not ignore the jealousy factor. Reports suggest that not everyone in the locker room is thrilled with Sanders' rise. Some see his charisma, his community presence, his growing popularity, and view it as a threat to their own standing. One name that keeps coming up? Anthony. Someone reportedly uncomfortable with how naturally Sanders commands respect, on and off the field. It's the kind of tension that doesn't come from conflict, but from envy. When someone earns their influence and others feel they're slipping, the friction becomes inevitable. That friction is part of the reason this whole situation feels so volatile. It's not just leadership that's resisting Sanders. It's players who've grown comfortable within a system that rewards conformity over challenge. And Sanders, even unintentionally, challenges that system just by existing. But here's the part that leadership seems to have underestimated. Suppression doesn't last. Talent rises. Character endures. And the longer you try to keep someone like Sanders in the background, the more obvious it becomes what you're afraid of. The Browns can continue spinning this as injury management, development strategy, or depth chart shuffling. But the truth is already out. The leaks have made sure of that. The damage is done. And the clock is ticking. Every week Sanders is benched without explanation. The credibility of the front office takes another hit. Every vague injury update erodes trust. Every time Gabriel throws a mediocre game while Sanders waits in the wings, fans grow more frustrated. They're not buying the PR spin. They're paying attention. And they're starting to demand answers. And when the truth finally breaks through, and it will, the accountability won't stop at the coaching staff. It will reach every decision-maker who played a role in this calculated suppression. Because this isn't just a mishandled roster decision. It's a betrayal of talent, of leadership, and of the fan base that believed in the future. SSNcast, this could have been a breakout season for Sanders. Instead, it's becoming a lesson in how ego and fear can choke opportunity before it even starts. But here's what makes it powerful. Shedeur isn't going anywhere. He's staying the course. He's staying composed. And when his moment comes, the people who tried to silence him will have to watch as everything they fear becomes reality. The fans know what they're seeing. The media is catching up. The locker room is divided. And Stefanski? He's running out of time. Like this video, if you've been following the lies. Share it with someone who's been asking the same questions. Drop a comment if you're done watching leadership throw potential under the bus. And make sure you're subscribed, because the truth is leaking fast, and the fallout hasn't even started. At this point, you can't even call it subtle. It's become glaring. The Browns aren't just dragging their feet with Shedeur Sanders. They're actively blocking the door. The strategy? Obfuscation. The motive? Control. And the fallout? Well, that's the part they're trying to avoid. But with every snap that doesn't go to Sanders, and every press conference dodging the obvious, the walls keep closing in. There's no more room to pretend this is just standard rookie handling. That narrative flew out the window the minute the leaks dropped. And now, All eyes are on Kevin Stefanski, who's looking less like a composed coach with plan and more like a man bracing for impact. Because what exactly is the plan here? Let's walk through it. You've got a quarterback with talent, pedigree, composure, and real leadership skills, sidelined behind vague injury reports and strategically limited reps. Meanwhile, Dylan Gabriel is out there as a starter, not because he's outshining anyone, but because he doesn't threaten the structure. That's the difference. One makes the system comfortable. The other exposes its cracks. And that's what Sanders does. Just by showing up, just by staying steady, just by doing the work and letting his game speak, he highlights every insecurity in that locker room and front office. From the start, the moves have felt off. The shifting depth chart placements that seem to drop Sanders just when momentum builds. The press mentions that downplays progress. The back injury that always reappears when the pressure to play him spikes. These aren't coincidences. They're patterns. And when you look at them all together, it starts to feel less like a coaching decision and more like a containment plan. Here's the part that stings. They're not even hiding it well anymore. The noise coming from the organization, the vague talking points, the overly rehearsed responses, they're just distractions, misdirection. They want to make this about development, about caution, but it's not. It's about ego. It's about power. And above all, it's about control. What Stefanski and his circle seem to fear most is losing the narrative. Because once Sanders steps onto that field and does what many believe he's capable of, it forces everyone to ask, why wasn't this happening sooner? And that's a question this leadership group doesn't want to answer, because then the finger points backward, to the coaches who made the calls, to the execs who co-signed them, to the players who quietly enabled it. And suddenly, it's not just about Shedeur Sanders. It's about systemic suppression, about talent being actively muted to preserve the reputations of people whose grip on the team is slipping. That's the real story behind these leaks. Not just that Sanders has been sidelined, but why. You have a young quarterback who not only shows promise on the field, but commands respect off it. His community involvement isn't a PR stunt. It's genuine. His leadership isn't performative. It's earned. And that kind of authenticity, it doesn't need a media team. It doesn't need a coach's approval. It connects directly with the people, with the fans, with the city. And that's what threatens the organization most. Because when a player becomes bigger than the system, when fans rally behind someone who wasn't handed the job but earned every ounce of respect, that's when the balance shifts. That's when leadership starts to look unnecessary. That's when control slips. The fear isn't that Sanders won't perform. The fear is that he will, and that his success will make all of this look like what it is, a calculated campaign to keep power from shifting into the hands of someone who wasn't supposed to have it. And it's not just Stefanski. This runs deeper. Across the locker room, there's tension. There are players, like Anthony, who reportedly bristle at Sanders' rise. Not because he's done anything wrong, but because he's managed to shine without stepping on anyone. That kind of quiet dominance, it gets under people's skin. Especially the ones whose careers depend on being the guy. The jealousy in a locker room isn't new, but when it's weaponized by leadership, when it becomes part of a broader effort to marginalize a player, it becomes toxic, and that toxicity is seeping out. The locker room knows something's wrong. The media knows. The fans definitely know. You can feel in the way Stefanski answers questions now. Tight, rehearsed, dodgy. He's not coaching anymore. He's managing fallout, and it shows. The longer they suppress Sanders, the more damage they do, not just to him, but to the culture of the entire team. Because when players see merit being ignored, when they see politics outweigh performance, it corrodes trust, it kills morale, and it signals to everyone watching that talent isn't enough, compliance is. But Sanders hasn't folded. That's what makes this even more infuriating. He hasn't lashed out. He hasn't fed the media. He hasn't caused drama. He stayed focused. Quiet. Steady. The kind of person you want in your organization, if your organization is built on values. But this one's built on hierarchy, on control, and Sanders, just by being himself, disrupts that. Every decision made to keep him off the field is a decision rooted in fear. Fear that his talent will speak louder than the spin. that his leadership will connect deeper than the team's messaging, that his presence will shift the locker room dynamic in a way that can't be reversed. And they're not wrong. That will happen because talent like this doesn't stay buried forever. It rises, and when it does, it doesn't just change a team, it exposes it. When Sanders finally gets a shot, it's not just a game, it's a statement. It's the moment where all the excuses collapse, where the spin stops spinning, where people start asking who made the call to hold him back, and why. That's the part they're not ready for. But they should be, because it's coming. The pressure is building. The spotlight is turning. And every week this continues, the anger grows. The fans aren't buying it. The noise isn't going away. And the longer they push against this tide, the bigger the crash will be. You can't stop a player like Shedeur Sanders with politics. Not forever. And when the truth finally takes the field, it's going to be undeniable. The Browns can't keep this buried forever. That's the harsh truth. No matter how tightly they try to hold the reins, no matter how carefully they craft their talking points, no matter how long they ride the back injury excuse, this is not going away. And they know it. CB fans' photos, that's why there's panic. It's not just that the narrative is crumbling. It's that it's crumbling publicly. What started as quiet grumbling among fans has turned into full-on scrutiny. The media is circling. Questions are getting sharper. The contradictions are piling up. Stefanski's demeanor in press conferences has shifted from controlled to cagey. And every week that Shedeur Sanders doesn't play, the pressure grows louder, heavier, more undeniable. What the Browns tried to do behind the scenes is now the main storyline on the scene. And it's only accelerating. It's not just about what they've done. It's about what it says. The message they've sent, intentionally or not, is clear. Merit takes a backseat to control. Talent comes second to comfort. And leadership is only valuable if it fits neatly inside their pre-approved mold. Anything outside of that? Threat. Shedeur Sanders is that threat. He's not disruptive. He's not causing issues. But he is independent. And that's what they can't stand. He's not waiting for permission to lead. He's already leading through action, through presence, through connection. He's a cultural shift wrapped in a football jersey. And for an organization like the Browns, used to hierarchy, optics, and tightly managed messaging, that's not something they can easily contain. And so they've tried to suffocate the rise. Quietly, systematically. A little adjustment here. A phantom injury there. Less media availability. Questionable depth chart shifts. All under the radar, until it wasn't. The leaks exposed everything. The manipulation, the favoritism, the fear. When Dillon Gabriel was named the starter, it wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. A signal that the organization wasn't making decisions based on performance. It was circling the wagons. Gabriel, by all accounts, is serviceable, but he's not transformational. And that's exactly the point. You don't lose control with serviceable. You don't lose power with safe. But with Sanders, the moment he gets the keys, the spotlight shifts. The control shifts. The narrative changes. That's what they're fighting to prevent. And in the process, they're torching their credibility. Fans aren't stupid. They see what's happening. They see the leadership speak in circles. They see a promising quarterback stuck in neutral, while the team scrapes by on conservative game plans and political decision-making. And they're done being patient. The question isn't when will Sanders play anymore. It's why hasn't he? Why? In a league that thrives on explosive, game-changing quarterbacks, is the Browns' most dynamic option sitting on the sideline with no clear path forward? Why are vague explanations enough to justify keeping him out of action, while others with less talent are given a leash a mile long? Because the truth is, it was never about competition. It was about compliance. And Shedeur Sanders doesn't do compliance. He does impact. That's why his presence is so uncomfortable for the current regime. He's not just a quarterback. They can't file him under a generic player label. He's a symbol now. A symbol of what happens when someone rises through integrity, effort, and authentic leadership, and does it without the organization's blessing. And symbols like that, they don't go away quietly. Let's be real. There's a reason Sanders hasn't clapped back publicly. There's a reason he hasn't fed the drama. He doesn't need to. His silence is powerful. His patience speaks volumes. Every time he steps onto the practice field, every time he keeps showing up and doing the work without the spotlight, he gains more support from fans, from teammates, from people paying attention. And the Browns are losing control of the narrative. At this point, it's a matter of time. The only question is how this ends. Either they course correct and give Sanders the opportunity he's earned, or they let the pressure mount until it breaks them. And make no mistake, if they don't handle this soon, they're heading straight for the second option. Because what happens when Sanders eventually gets a shot and plays the way so many believe he can? What happens when the world sees what the Browns tried to suppress? It doesn't make Sanders look good. He already looks good. It makes him look like frauds. It makes every injury excuse, every rotation strategy, every media dodge look like what it is: manipulation, fear, a desperate attempt to hold on to a structure that was never built to support true leadership in the first place. And once that's exposed, they won't just be answering to fans. They'll be answering to the league, to ownership, to every future player who looks at the Browns and wonders if talent really matters here, or if politics will always win. They're not just risking a quarterback's development. They're risking the soul of the team. You can't build a winning culture when your best leaders are being sidelined for being too independent. You can't sell the idea of accountability when your internal politics run deeper than your depth chart. And you definitely can't convince the locker room to buy in when everyone sees what's really going on. The Browns created this crisis, not Shedeur Sanders. And they've got one chance left to fix it before the damage becomes permanent. Because at the end of the day, this is bigger than football. It's about principle. It's about whether organizations will evolve or keep burying those who don't play the politics game. So keep your eyes on Cleveland. This story isn't done. The pressure is building. The fan base is watching. And the truth is coming out play by play, press conference by press conference, leak by leak. Like this if you're tired of the lies. Share it if you see through the spin. Drop a comment if you've been asking the same questions. And if you believe it's time for the Browns to stop hiding behind excuses and start doing what's right. And make sure you're subscribed, because the way this ends, it's going to find a lot more than just one player's career. It's going to expose who this team really is.